Hello, Damien from the other side here. Hope you're having a great, happy new year and not being too busy and that you're able to take a break. We're back on January 24th with a new year of the best news without the woke for 2025. Until then, enjoy one of our top segments from last year. Well, now we're going to get kind of controversial on the show. Natural law expert, millennial, classical, liberal, all-round good guy, and other side regular commentator Rob McMullen joins us in the studio, mate. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
I wanted to get you in to talk a little bit about a very sensitive topic that's somewhat risky to talk about, but the feminization, and we're not talking about women specifically, but just the general feminization of Australian culture, Australian politics, Australian law, Australian everything, and the impact that that's having on our culture. But first, a drinking game.
That was what I was going to open with. I identified a new drinking game, and I'm ready actually because you might have thought this was a long black, but it's heavily laced.
Oh, okay.
It's heavily laced with a good single malt. No, not really. But you can take a shot every time a Labor politician's social media profile is laid out something like father to, husband to, passionate squash player. Oh, and I happen to be the minister for blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. By the way, I have this really responsible adult grown-up role too.
That's right.
Let's have a look at some of these. I mean, I can't believe it. You put them all together. It just cracks me up.
That's right.
Let's have a look at the Chris Bowen one first of all. So the first thing that Chris Bowen's profile says, this is on Twitter, I assume, says husband to Beck, dad to Grace and Max, and then Minister for Climate Change and Energy, living on the land of the Cabrogal people of the Darug Nation, lover of Labradors. Aww.
How adorable.
Oh, how adorable you are,
Isn't that
Chris
what
Bowen.
matters?
Hey?
Isn't that what matters?
Queensland Premier, Chuckles Miles. Let's have a look at his. Oh, yeah. First of all, he's a husband. He's a husband before he's anything else.
That's right.
Dad of 3, Broncos fan. Oh, well, that's almost not allowed. Blah, blah, blah. Queensland's new Premier. Yeah, okay. And Jason Clare, MP. Atticus and Jack's dad. Okay. Louisa's husband. All right. Minister for Education. Blah, blah, blah. What's so bad about this? I mean, why is this a thing, and why should we even give a damn?
Well, the frequency with which that same formula was used, it just looked to me like the hashtag care social media TM package has been, filtered down from social media HQ. It's the cynical, look at me, feely feels like I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I love my Labradors. That's more important than my responsibilities to society almost, because it comes first.
And you would define that as kind of the traditional masculine side of what I do for a living as a contributor to the world, my output, my masculine output versus my feminine nurturing sort of side.
There's the idea that there's our personal lives and there are our societal and professional lives. And it's a bit of a stereotype, but I think, the feminization, it lives in around the home and the home life, whereas as a fairly red-blooded male, I don't really care. How are you going to run society properly? That's more my prerogative.
Yeah, well, that's what we're employing them to do. We're not employing them to tell us how much of a great husband, or we're not marrying them, I suppose.
That's right.
The award has to go, though, to Tony Burke.
Oh, Tony Burke.
We've got to put Tony Burke's up. This is a classic, man. The first thing he says is Sky's husband, dad and stepdad, Labor MP, in spare time, guitar, piano, poetry, theatre. Love poetry and theatre myself, but, that's not really what I'd be putting on my profile. Kayaking and national parks. Okay, whoop-de-doo. But yeah, here it is. It's like it's a little emasculating, right? To say could you imagine? I mean, let's just put this in. There's a lot of women out there probably raging at us right now, but just stop for a minute, ladies.
We mean well, ladies.
And let's have a little think about this for a second. Imagine if the first thing that we thought you should put on your thing was Rob's wife or Damien's wife, instead of what you do for a living.
Imagine leading with that with a CV for a professional job.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, the first thing you should know about me is that,
Yeah. I'm Rob McMullen's wife.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not going to work. So it's a little bit emasculating. It sort of speaks to a cultural shift that's occurred in Australia, which a lot of people might say is a nice, touchy-feely thing, but it has a dark side.
Well, look, that's the thing with virtue signalling, is that you can hack the virtue because it's just a signal. You don't necessarily need to be demonstrating the virtues you're putting forward.
Right.
And so that was another thing I wanted to talk about is as interesting, I'll say silly as I find it, leading with the personal lives in the professional sphere. I think you go to work for a bunch of guys, and it's good to keep the personal at home. Like, it's great for the people in your life, but in the professional or political sphere, in the sphere that we're paying taxes for these people to do these jobs, that's not the first thing that I need from them.
No.
I really need the job done well.
Yeah.
And so, and then we get into that area of virtue signaling. Well, they're signaling this personal feel-good personability, is that the word? They're bringing their personal lives to make people feel good and connect with them on a personal level. But as a virtue signal, like I said, the reality doesn't necessarily have to match up with what they're signaling. And
it quite often doesn't.
It quite often doesn't. And I thought it was interesting to juxtapose that with the reality in Australia for people who want to have families or who have young families. And unfortunately, despite all the cynical social media virtue signaling, the reality is often quite different for people who have families under Labor.
Well, you are a millennial, middle-class, small business person, successful but small business person, average middle-class sort of income. You're successful, you're doing well, but you're feeling the pain of trying to have a young family or having a young family in Australia in this time and owning a home.
Well, I think a lot of people are, is the point. A lot of people are. And, the first thing I pointed to is there's been so much talk about birth rates. Can we go there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how cynical for these politicians to signal, well, I'm somebody's dad and I've got a family, but the reality is that less people than ever before are actually having families.
Let's have a look at these birth rates. Let's have a look at the chart now. This is a chart from IFM, an investment group, IFM Investors. They put data together from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the World Bank. And they've come out with a number that's pretty startlingly low and a bit lower than other estimates, but it's saying it's a legitimate analysis they've done here. And they're saying that the birth rate is 1.06 now. Now, 1.06 means that every year per 100 people in Australia, there are 1.06 births. And that is not a sustainable replacement level. Like, you've got to be at about 2.2 or 2.1 to be replacement.
2.1.
Right. Okay. So it's sort of like 1 to replace mum, 1 to replace dad, and 0.1 for
that's right
for to cover any problems that might occur on the way. And we used to be at around, if you look at back, this chart goes back to 1950s. So it used to be around about 2.3, just under 2.3, coming down to the 2 level at around about 1975, and then just plummeting since. And now here we are at sort of 1, which means we're going to die out in a couple of generations. As original Australians, at least. When I say original Australians, I better clarify that. But
yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
Australians probably, if you would say, were second generation or more.
Yeah.
Right. Families.
Well, as we have it now, we have a native Australian population. We have Australians now, and they're not having sufficient children to sustain the nation. And so obviously the Labor are reacting to this by bringing in record numbers of migrants to keep the population up. But I mean, that's going to have a whole array of effects, and it's going to create drastic changes to the country. So
let's have a look at that too. Australian net overseas migration chart, this one from Macro Business. And everyone's been talking about this, but we are at net migration of 520,000 plus for 2023, or 500. I had the exact number there somewhere. Here we go. So our population now is 26.97 million. That's at 31 December 2023. So it's definitely 27 million now. That was 2.5% higher than a year earlier. But the growth was driven by net overseas migration of 547,000 in 2023. And net is number of people in minus number of people out. So it's a pretty high number for 1 year. And number of new people in, I think, was even higher. It was like 700 and something thousand. And and 1 million in the 18 months, I think, to now. So pretty wild number of new people coming into the country. There's only 27 million people and we've got 1 million new people.
Well, it's unprecedented. And I don't know about you, but once I saw past the feel-good virtue signaling of the social media profiles, oh, I'm X's dad, I'm someone's husband. Well, the reality being that less people are able to have that reality than ever before. It's quite shocking. And it's all happening under Labor's management. They're in power almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's a variety of economic, social, cultural issues that are contributing to that and that Labor actually contribute to. So on one hand, they're virtue signaling about family and family values and the families they have, but on the other hand, they're undercutting so many Australians' ability to have their own families.
Right.
Which I think is shocking.
Yeah. So there you go. So the virtue signaling, again, is just a load of rubbish.
Absolute rubbish.
Poured over a serious problem. Rob, we're talking about this question of sort of net migration going through the roof. We've got Australia's birth rate falling, so we're having massive demographic change. But we're having the population increase when we don't have enough housing. We're not really taking care. Cost of living is going through the roof because governments are spending too much. So we're not actually taking care of families at all, despite all this lovely virtue signalling from our somewhat emasculated, perhaps, Labor MPs online.
Right.
How do we fix this? What has to change?
I mean, if you take something complex like birth rates, there's always a multitude of factors that come into it. But there's a few things I think we could definitely point to. Like you said, most people are not going to have children if they don't have anywhere to put them. And so Australians want to buy houses, and not even just apartments. They want houses. They want a backyard. They don't want iPad apartment children, And the levels of immigration we've had are making that harder than ever before. It's mathematically not possible that if you're bringing in more people into the country at a rate faster than we can build houses, then it's going to increase the demand, therefore the cost of housing. It's mathematically not possible.
Yeah.
And also too, a lot of the people they're bringing in will be competing for labour jobs. And so for your average Australian, average working Australian, you might be up in the professional classes, or we all know definitely the political classes, and doing quite well. But if you're in the labour market, there's no way, it's mathematically not possible that bringing in more population is not creating more competition for wages. So your working class Australians are going to suffer, they're going to struggle to get those wage increases, they're going to compete for wage increases.
Now, traditionally the left would say, well, you're anti-immigration and and we need this labour. We need people to come in and work. And we do have some fantastic people here working, thank God, because we do have labour shortages in many areas because of other mismanagement. But I think I heard Douglas Murray or somebody saying the other day that, you bring in migrant workers to look after the elderly, to be nurses, and we've got some fantastic migrant workers in Australia in that field. But they get old, and then they need people to look after them, and it just keeps going.
Right.
And that's where the UK has sort of gotten itself into this sort of vicious circle, I guess.
Absolutely.
So you do have to come to a point where you say, well, what sort of a nation do we want to be, right? And what are we?
It's always a short-term fix, isn't it? It's always kicking the can down the road. And it seems like a lot of these, look, especially the Labor politicians, they can get in, they virtue signal about their family life and how pro-family they are, get their pay packets and get out. And so, by the time the migrant workers start aging themselves, and it's a Ponzi scheme. It's not their problem. Even you talk about the UK, even Nigel Farage is coming out saying, the levels of immigration we're having, it's the levels. We've always had some immigration, but it's the levels that we're having currently. It's increasing the pricing of housing, and it's making people compete harder for wages.
Let's put that chart back up, the Australian net overseas migration chart, and you can see pretty clearly there, just looking, because it goes back to 1900. And if you look on the left-hand side there, we have zero, and then World War I obviously drops down. Then it sort of stays pretty much, around zero. I mean, there's the spike after the war, and then you got World War II where it's flat, and then you come into the 50s and we start having, migration at a kind of around the 100,000 level right through until sort of 2010, and we see that spike in 2010 up to about 250,000. So that was the Rudd era, I guess. Rudd Gillard Rudd and Turnbull, Abbott Turnbull, or whatever the heck it was. Two of our finest prime ministers in our entire history. Thank you, both sides of mainstream politics, for those guys. And then we've got the sort of plummeting back to zero during COVID, and then there's just this astronomical explosion in the last 12 months, 18 months.
Absolutely.
It's being felt, right? People are going to feel that. That's not responsible, gradual, sensible, assimilated immigration, is it?
No, it's not. And like you said, Australians are suffering under the 1-2 punch of Labor and Liberal. You know, if you look at the extreme left, like the Greens, they're acting under this utopian vision that they can take care of everybody and we can all equalise the entire world and we'll all be fine and sing and dance in the fields together. You know, but that's not the reality. We can't take care of the entire world. We can take care of a certain amount of people. We can give a certain amount of people Western opportunities at a time, and that can keep going. But we certainly can't caretake the entire world, or 1 million a year.
Yeah.
And then Labor, they're acting up much on the same thing. The Labor really seems to represent the bureaucracy to me these days, and so it's good for a lot of government bureaucrats. You know, they have more people to sell programs to, they have more political dependence. But then Liberals as well, instead of looking after small business, sole trader people, they really seem to be shifted to looking after big business. And look, the thing is, if you own a utility, if you're selling phones or power, something that everybody can afford, more bodies in a country simply means more profit. But if you're a small business, that's where, or middle class, that's where you're really getting stuck. So it suits the extreme left's utopian visions. It suits the bureaucracies, and it suits the big end of town, the big business. But it's, once again, it's your working middle class, sole trader, small business Australians that are really getting hit. And I've said a lot of times, you know, the middle class is really the more moral class because they're the ones face to face with reciprocity. You know, they're the ones who, if they don't do well at their job, they don't get paid.
Right.
They don't have subsidies. They're not big enough to get subsidies to stay afloat if they do a bad job.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know.
And they're not small enough to need welfare and be able to
That's
access
right.
government welfare. So you've
They're
got
not
this.
dependent.
So the middle class are the ones who really are at the coalface of what is, when you're saying they're the sort of the most moral class, you mean they're the class that sort of feel the impact of consequences of their behaviour, their reciprocity and natural law theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, viewers should check out our chat about reciprocity and natural law. But that's in the middle class, in a small business, where you come face to face with that. And you know, I've always been a huge advocate of small business. I worked in small businesses myself because you're so close to the boss. So if you come from working classes and you go work in a small business, the boss very often will have lunch with you and talk about business. And you learn so much that you don't learn as a cubicle worker in a big corporation.
Well, the left like to sort of paint corporations as evil corporations of the, you know, and corporations are big bureaucracies just like government. They are, in effect, fairly lefty. That's how they operate, right? I mean, they're big bureaucratic organisations. They're removed and detached by their size and power from the impacts of the market. They can have a buffer to the impacts of the market a lot more than probably obviously small business does. Small business represents the innovator, the entrepreneur, the person who gets up and has a go, tells the boss to go stick it and tries it out on their own. That person has to be protected. That is what made the West great, really, is you know, empowering little people to go out and say, you know what, I'm going to have a crack at this on my own. I'm going to set up my own business. I'm going to do it slightly differently, and then we get innovation from that, and we grow, and the market grows. And so, small business is about much, much more than just, you know, being a segment of society that we need to look after. It's the essence of what it means to be a liberal democratic nation. That we aren't just a bunch of people going and working either for massive government bureaucracies or going and working every day for massive corporate bureaucracies. And that's you would think, with Marx always banging on about, you know, the dehumanization of working in a big organization, that would be the very thing that we're trying to prevent. But we're not. We've got government and large corporations working together now to squash that innovation, that independence, that small business spirit. Because the more regulation the government puts in, the more rules, the harder it is for the small business to comply. The only people that can comply are the big businesses, the corporates, and you end up with a world full of corporates and no little guys.
Absolutely.
So What I want to tie this back to this concept you were talking about, and again, this is not about women and men so much. It's the feminization, though. This idea, I quite like the way you think about this, and just if you could explain that, how that corporate world suits that feminist, well, it is feminist in a way, but feminized view of life.
Well, you know, we where we are at in society is, you know, one of the dominant values is empathy. You know, and I always talk about the cognitive bias of men and women. You know, it's on average, in general, men bias a little bit towards systems, women bias a little bit towards empathy. It's not really groundbreaking stuff. Anyone who's honest will tell you they can see that.
So it's the compassion
It's
and the pragmatism sort of thing coming out. It's
Yeah, well-
which we have to have in balance in all of us to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
But definitely biased in men towards the systemization and the
Yes.
the yang, I think it would be in Chinese philosophy, and then the yin of the feminine energy and the
Absolutely.
and you have to have that imbalance in society.
Absolutely. Well, the yin yang's interesting because you've got these two halves, but then there's a part of each in the other as well.
Oh, the little dot.
The little dot.
That's what that's for.
Yeah. So it's saying, you know, like we might act in our capitalizing, pragmatic, masculine, but you know, we all have a side of us that can appreciate feminine virtues, and opposite for women too.
Right.
So we're not really talking about people. We're just talking about what's societally ascendant at the moment is a lot of feminine virtues, above all else. Above all else, at the exclusion of all else, is empathy, compassion, care. And once you get a system like that put in place, you get the virtue signalers come in and signal through that system, whether they actually believe it themselves or act it out in reality.
Well, I didn't bring it with me,
matter.
but I got a flyer from our local Green federal MP.
Yeah,
He is.
yeah.
And the flyer was like all about how nice the trees are and the weather is and blah, 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 and all our local, and I hope you've been enjoying our local environment, having little walks in the park and everything. It's like, well, that's lovely, but you're the federal member of parliament. So
right.
how about you talk about defence and
right.
the economy and, you know, national security and issues that really matter on a federal, national level, and do your job. And she's not capable of that because she's not got that component to her personality, knowing her as I do, and having met her. But I think, you know, this is the issue, right? I mean, we've got a lot of people like that, not just women, but people in the bureaucracy who are very feminized and who putting the emphasis on these things of compassion and empathy, which is lovely until a masculine entity like China comes along and wants to go squish.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Then
Look,
you need some men.
that's right. Look, the masculine systematic thing, we talk about capitalizing, you know, getting back to the natural law thing, we have to create capital. I'm talking about all sorts of capital, not just money, but money, because entropy is a force of nature. Everything's always trying to decay, so we need to be putting energy in to maintaining what we've got. And, you know, you talk about geopolitics. It's taken as a given in geopolitics that if you are weak, you're incentivizing someone else to act against you. And so in that way, other people, other nations act as a proxy for entropy. You need to keep certain structures in place, otherwise you'll see the negative effects, and that's the importance of the birth rates. So the point with the masculine and feminine thing is that we have feminine virtues of empathy and compassion and never upsetting anybody, but we like to pretend, and especially Greens and Labor, they like to pretend or believe in this utopian vision that prioritising those virtues to the exclusion of all else has no cost. It's always got a cost. Look at Thomas Sowell. You know, conservatives do trade-offs because they're looking at different things. So we need to keep capitalising. We need to keep our economy strong and competitive. You can caretake to the point where you undermine the competitiveness and the efficiency of society, and that's where we're at. So we've got Labor politicians virtue signaling about their family values and how compassionate and wonderful and empathetic everything is. Nobody can be upset, but the reality is our society is less efficient, less capitalising, and we're seeing the effects. People can't afford homes, people are not having children, and that's going to have an effect on the competitiveness of our society through time.
All right, Rob, so we're out of time, but to finish up, just, you know, we looking at on this show over the past few weeks, the demonisation of men, which we're seeing massively with our corrupted mess of a family court system where men are just constantly losing out. And there just is no other way to put it. I, as a journalist, and I try to be objective as I can, the stories that I've heard are horrific. We're seeing false accusations on the rise. and that is just a fact. It's just reality, and as much as people want to try to deny it. We're hearing a narrative of domestic violence that turns out isn't correlated to homicide rates. It doesn't seem to be there. So that when you look at the data, you don't have that. That's all fear-mongering. It's all campaigning.
Can I just quickly say as well, on the one hand, you've got Labor politicians virtue signaling their family values, but then you did a great segment saying that this fear-mongering about, violence against women, it doesn't fit the numbers. It's been trending down for decades. So you don't think that scaring the crap out of women is going to undermine their confidence to have relationships and marriages and children with men? So once again, in one hand, Labor's saying, oh, look at these wonderful family values, but we're undercutting that same thing.
Well, the left have always traditionally been the ones to undercut family values and the family as a social institution because they want the state to be the dominant social institution, the government. They want everybody married to the government, dependent on the government, right? It's not about being part of the family. That's leftist Marxist theory.
That's right.
Right, I get it. So they're actually doing this on purpose?
Well, I'm not
undermining the family?
I don't know.
It just seems to be coming from a lot of different directions.
There's an interesting theory that says the purpose of a system is what it does.
Okay.
We could apply Occam's razor to that and say, well, we can't see into people's minds, but I think most people do want families. They do want happy marriages. They do want great cooperation, reciprocity between men and women. So they'll cynically virtue signal that. Say, look, everything's really nice, really pro-family, but what's the reality? We're demonizing men. We're given, making harsh economic conditions, and it's having negative effects.
And demonising religion, traditional values, all that sort of thing as well.
That's right.
All right, mate. Always good to talk to you. Great to have you on the
Pleasure.
show. Hope you liked that segment. If you did, head over now to our website at othersidetv.com.au and sign up to join us in our mission to take the depressing victimhood out of the news and stop looking to bigger and bigger government to save us. It can't and it won't. There is a better way to view the world. The Other Side. We're back from holidays Friday, January 24. In the meantime, check us out, othersidetv.com.au. If you have a Netflix or other streaming media account from a global company and you're on holidays and log in from another country, you may have noticed that shows that are available in those other countries are different. That's because different media companies have different deals with different streaming services in different countries. Imagine being able to log into Netflix, though, as if you were in America, or maybe a country that speaks a language other than English that you speak, to access more shows, but you can do it all without leaving your couch here in Australia. Well, there is a way. Private Internet Access VPN is a virtual private network. You download their app onto your phone, your TV, your computer, whatever you use, and it'll route your data through a different server location. Not only can you access more content, but a VPN keeps you safe and secure and your family safe so that you can't be tracked by prying eyes of big government and big corporations. And it will not massively slow down your internet speeds or make it harder to use your devices like some other VPNs do. Private Internet Access, PIA VPN. It's quick and easy to install, and once you've downloaded it, that is pretty much it. And the great news is if you sign up for PIA VPN, you are also helping the other side heaps and getting great value for money as well. And you can sign up using our special Other Side code for less than $3 a month. That's a whopping 83% off the normal price, and you'll get the first 4 months free. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside right now to get our special deal. That's piavpn.com/otherside.